Welcome back to Character Craft. I'm your host, Mitchell Drake. We're here again doing another randomly generated D&D character concept. Let's see how many classes we're going to be working with this time around. One. Okay, I don't think we've done a video for one subclass yet. These are great for role players who especially want to stick to a particular theme. So let's see. Druid. Okay, a single class druid. I really like Wildfire, so I might lean into that. Let's see. We've got Moon Druid, which is, of course, an extremely strong druid on its own. It scales really well with itself. Land Druid, I'm most likely going to avoid. What other druids are there? There's the... I can't remember the name of it. The Starry Druid, something along that line. There's Twilight. So, well, let's see what we have. Druids are very strong as a single class, so I'm excited to get a one-shot for them. Let's get it going. Okay, we are at the Forge, and I'm excited for this one because we get a pet, and pets are pretty cool as long as we know how to use them properly. I also think the Druid is a great class to run as a single class. It's very reliant on specific themes when it comes to the subclasses, and diving into those subclasses really explores the themes thoroughly. Single class builds are going to be pretty cool on the channel. I'm going to use the opportunity to really focus on the character details and roleplay, and not have to worry too much about complex game mechanics. I'm also going to use these one class videos as kind of short info videos on topics I think are cool and have adapted the character around. But I'll keep that information stuff for the second half of the video. We went with the Wildfire Druid this time around, which is probably tied for my favorite druid along with the Stars Druid. Usually we start with the race for these videos, but we're going to begin with the class this time around. The race gives us a bonus to one of our class features, and we need to understand the feature before we understand the bonus. Wildfire Druids, super cool. They can summon a small fire elemental as an action in exchange for one of their wild shape uses. The elemental is summoned within 30 feet of you, does AoE fire damage when summoned, and can be commanded as a bonus action. Its HP also scales with your druid level, it has a ranged attack, can fly, and has a team teleport. So you get quite a lot of stuff in just one little elemental. It's awesome. The appearance of the elemental is also flexible, so you can get creative with that. I was initially considering a cat for the elemental, but went with a dog instead because Hero Forge has a separate dog and wolf model, but that's going to be relevant later. The subclass also gives you access to some cool spells that druids don't normally have, like Scorching Ray and Revivify. At level 6, we get Enhanced Bond, which lets us add a d8 of bonus fire damage to our fire spells, or a d8 of extra healing to our healing spells while our elemental is summoned. This also lets us cast any spell with a range other than self from our elemental instead of our own body. This includes awesome support spells like Guidance, Lesser Restoration, Enhance Ability, and Revivify. I can just imagine our fire dog nuzzling up to a fallen friend and using their healing warmth to return them back to life. For ranged spells, this will effectively increase your range for them without having to risk your own personal safety. The only range requirement that is given with the elemental is that it has to be summoned within 30 feet of you. It doesn't disappear or have a range it must be within to take orders from you. And just to throw this in there too, Charm Person and Thorn Whip are also on the Druid spell list, so you can use that on a target using your elemental. It is debatable whether the target would be charmed by you or the elemental, but that's a table discussion. You can have that with your own DM. But I love the idea of a fire dog fetching an enemy or charming it with their puppy dog eyes. Level 10, we get Cauterizing Flame. Whenever a small or larger creature dies within 30 feet of us or the elemental, a magic flame appears in that spot for 1 minute. If a creature enters a space with a flame in it, you can use your reaction to either heal or burn them for 2d10 plus your wisdom modifier in damage or health. You can activate this ability a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and they can come back on a long rest. At level 10, your proficiency bonus is +4, and your wisdom modifier will most likely be +4 or 5, depending on how you determined your stats. So a free mix of 8d10 plus 16 damage or healing is pretty good. Thematically, I like this feature a lot because the uses are only expended if you activate the flame as a reaction. Any number of flames can appear on the battlefield as long as the size, range, and time requirements are met. So I can picture a wondrous blanket of flames on a battlefield after your party's wizard drops a fireball on the Legion of Kobolds that is attacking your flame elemental. The flame elemental is also immune to fire, so they're perfectly safe in that situation once the kobolds are gone. Also, for some reason, Fireball isn't on the list of spells that you get with this subclass. Not exactly sure whose decision that was at Wizards of the Coast. I think it's a huge missed opportunity. Someone really dropped the ball, but the subclass has been out too long, and this is a common argument with the subclass, so we're not going to, get too far into it. At level 14, we get the Blazing Revival feature. If you fall to 0 hit points and become unconscious while within 120 feet of your elemental, the elemental falls to 0 hit points instead, and you are back on your feet with half of your total hit points. You can only use this once per long rest, but that's still insane to have this access. Flavoring the elemental as a phoenix would be awesome for this feature alone. And at level 20, all druids get promoted to archdruids and can wild shape an unlimited number of times, meaning it only took 20 levels to keep your elemental friend along permanently. You're definitely going to want to take the Elemental Adept feat, which will help you ignore the fire resistance on enemies and increase your average damage rolls for fire spells. Unfortunately, this feat doesn't apply to anything other than the spells you cast, rules as written, but you can talk to your DM about applying it to the Elemental's damage as well. That's a discussion for between you two. Now, onto the race. I chose Fairy. Fairy is cool because it has flying and free access to the Fairy Fire spell. Both are great additions, but that's not why we're here. We're here for the Enlarge and Reduce spell. Enlarge Reduce is a spell that makes a creature or object bigger or smaller if they fail a Constitution saving throw, or a willing creature can fail the save automatically. Now, why do we care about that? The honest answer is that I want to ride the fire dog into battle. Enlarge turns the elemental into a medium-sized creature. Fairies are automatically small-sized, meaning that you're allowed to use the dog as a mount. I know that you can already fly, so riding a flying dog doesn't matter mechanically, but that's not why we're here. We're here because that's cool. Does this have any other benefits other than, riding a fire dog into battle? Yes. Did I know any of that before I made this decision? No, I just wanted to ride the fire dog into battle. But that being said, I'm going to tell you the benefits of casting Enlarge on the dog anyway. Your dog gets advantage on strength checks and saving throws, meaning it is now a decent grappler. The rules of the elemental state that we are not limited to actions given in the stat block, so I think grappling is a fair action to command it to do. Also, the elemental's flame seed attacks are increased by 1d4 when they are enlarged, and something interesting on the stat block I found for the elemental as well, apparently they're immune to being grappled, so it is a free grapple on your side and they cannot grapple you back. I thought that was pretty cool. Casting Reduce on the elemental, on the other hand, makes them a tiny-sized, flaming pocket puppy. And I love that. We're going to call the little puppy the rogue's fiery friend. It's a very well-known rogue tactic to hide a spider familiar in their pocket to cheese their sneak attack feature as much as possible. Because it counts as long as an ally is within 5 feet of a target, the spider counts as an ally. A lot of rogues like to use this to get sneak attack. This uses the same concept, except the elemental can also teleport the rogue around wherever it wants within 15 feet. And it is also, important to note, strength checks and saving throws by the elemental, while they're smaller, are rolled with disadvantage, but they're, like I said, immune to grappling, so I don't think that matters too much. The flame seed attack also has its damage decreased by 1d4, but you're most likely just going to put them in the rogue's pocket just for the advantage, and maybe some support spells while they're there. So, Wildfire Druids. Wildfire is an inappropriate way to label this druid subclass. Even in the description, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it mentions that the druid has a lot of control over the fire and uses it for both creation and destruction, which is reflected in the damage and healing spells. It's kind of interesting because nothing in the subclass really implies that you don't have control over your fire at any point, and that you kind of actually have more control over regular fire than anything else. This is more of a segue to the informational part of the video. Wildfire Druids remind me of cultural burning, which was a practice used by many indigenous American tribes in North America for ecological and agricultural purposes. In the name of transparency, I couldn't find a concrete name that all of the North American tribes agreed on to refer to themselves as a whole. There are hundreds of different tribes with different opinions, so I apologize if I'm not using the proper term that you're familiar with. The more popular names I found were Indigenous Americans, American Indians, and First Nations, but it looks like the general consensus is the term Native American is no longer how they would like to be addressed as a whole. Back to the fire discussion, Indigenous Americans have a much more open and educated concept of fire than our modern view of it teaches us. They found that it can be used to farm safe crops and plants like blueberries and oak trees. A controlled burn would remove less beneficial vegetation from the ground to give the blueberries more room to flourish. The underground stem system of the blueberry bushes are extremely resistant to heat, and even if the remainder of the plant is burned, it will produce a new blueberry bush in its stead. Oak trees as well. Oak trees are the literal official tree of the United States and provided many indigenous Americans with pivotal food and resources. They wanted their oak trees to be as plentiful and healthy as possible, and they discovered that oak trees thrived when controlled burning was applied correctly. Controlled burning also helps prevent wildfires from getting too out of control by preemptively clearing many of the more flammable materials that accrue naturally on the forest floors over time. Some of you may have noticed I'm switching between past and present tense. Cultural burnings were outlawed in the United States as a whole in 1911, but were criminalized in some sections of the country as early as 1850. Obviously, this was an efficient method of destroying a misunderstood cultural practice and causing a century of damage, but it has had a resurgence in the past couple decades. With the increase in massively destructive wildfires occurring throughout the states, the banning of cultural burnings has been reconsidered as government agencies have been forced to acknowledge the problem. Fortunately, many indigenous tribes have been open to helping with guidance and the development of educational materials. And let me be very clear. Do not go out there and start a fire thinking you're helping. These are controlled burns, and they're now exclusively being performed by tribal foresters, firefighters, or trained rangers. The chances that you are watching this video and are actually capable of properly executing this is almost 0%, and the risk of you messing this up is very high. Leave it to the professionals. Don't start a fire. I've decided to name the character Gabriela DeJemez. I ran into a lot of different tribes when looking into this topic, but one of the articles featured the members of the Pueblo of Jemez in New Mexico heavily, so I thought I'd include them in some way. And I've named the dog Smolders. That has nothing to do other than having a fire pun. In-game, Gabriela is a staunch believer in the true nature of fire. It isn't a wholly destructive force that consumes all that stands in its path, and when properly utilized, it can defend, grow, and even heal those who wield it correctly. She uses Smolders as an educational partner, teaching those who will listen and showing them that fire can be used for good. Smolders only burns when instructed to, and casting spells like Mending and Continual Flame through him really sells Gabriela's point. I would love to have Gabriela as a character at the table with two conditions. The first condition being that the player is fully aware of how the elemental acts as part of their character, and that they don't get twice the play time just because they have twice the models on the table. The second more important condition is that if they choose to roleplay Gabriela, it has to be done in a respectful way. There's a fine line between taking inspiration from a culture and turning that culture into a prop for entertainment. D&D is a game of collaboration and interconnectivity. Racism from its participants shouldn't be allowed in any way. Otherwise, druids are already Swiss Army knives between their wild shape and the druid spell list. The subclass doesn't do anything that I would be too concerned with as a DM, but I would love seeing more dog models on the tabletop regularly. I want to thank everyone for sticking this far into the video. I know there were a few minutes of dense information towards the end there, but I always think it's nice to add some real-world elements to my characters in an educated and respectful way. Let me know what you think of Gabriela or what your favorite druid subclass is in the comments. I look forward to seeing you again, and sleep well.